Hi, everyone. I think everyone should be in by now. Thank you for joining today. I'm Daniel Senyard, and I'm going to share my screen. So, yeah, we're talking about duty of care and sort of how to step up and evaluate your duty of care program. So we do these webinars typically probably every second Thursday. Sometimes we'll slip ones in between where we'll do just a general demo. And these are, we really try to keep these to 15 minutes where you can bring your team members in to see demos or previews of new features. And we also record this so you can see prior recordings and register for new webinars at that URL, the bit.ly link. But you can also just go to sheptravel.com and click on the resources at the top. And there's a link with all the recordings. This week, as we said, we're talking about duty of care. And so it's no surprise to anyone that things have changed pretty dramatically over the course of the last year and a half-ish. So often people are finding that the status quo is not good enough anymore. The duty of care program or concerns they might have had isn't going to cut it. It's not enough just to have some policies, some words written down somewhere trying to tell your employees what to do. That's not going to cut it in this super dynamic world we're in at the moment. Because of all that, there's often new processes, new systems, new vendors all involved. And so, things have gotten a lot more complicated, which also can make things more confusing for your employee base. And the travelers are now expecting quality info. The last thing you want is for them to, look at booking a trip and then going through your tools and systems and then finding out by themselves on an external site that the data you provided was not up to date. They really need to have that trust that they're getting the most current, up to date, and valid data. And there was a stat that Concur put out that said 73% of employees expect the company to proactively reach out to them within 2 hours of an emergency. So, and I believe that was pre-COVID. So I'm sure that number's actually gone up more. If there was an outbreak and your employees were in a place, you can imagine how vital it would be for them to be able to, for you to know where they are, for them to be following the right procedures, and for them to get the right information. So basically, there's a couple different ways to look at your program. So there are different providers, and naturally there's going to be hundreds more here, but the primary ones are either focused on providing data, and especially when you're talking about things like COVID, you've got Citada and Riskline, who are two services we actually integrate into our platform, both of which bring in COVID restrictions, regulations, as does Sherpa. Some of them bring in other stuff, including, general risks, safety, riots, all that sort of stuff. That's a data service that allows you to layer in that sort of guidance or provide a site employees can go to research where they're going. And then you've got the sort of more traditional full service duty of care providers like your ISOS or WorldAware, for example. And they are not just the data, but then there's also a boots on the ground element where they'll have local experts and extraction teams. And depending on the complexity of your needs, they can fulfill a little bit more if you need more than just the information, but you actually need, ex-Marines, stationed on the continent that they can go and, help out or whatever the case is. So it's sort of the two ends of the spectrum. So what you need to do is evaluate your vendors and say, is what you're doing today enough? Whether it's a data service, is that enough? Do we now actually need physical human beings there to be able to help? Or if we're using one of those services, do they have enough data? Is their data fresh, or are they too old school that they don't have good, diverse data coming in from lots of live sources? Once you've evaluated that, you can work out, is it time to switch or upgrade your vendors? And if not, maybe you just need to find supplemental providers, new data services, new people or vendors that can help you with this. So you basically are expanding your program because everyone now becomes a traveler and cares about travel. So even employees coming in from vacation bring a risk into the office place. It's not just your business travelers, that are important as far as travel goes, that now the world and the sort of lens has broadened to include all employees in a lot of cases. And personal trips booked on OBTs is something a lot of companies are doing so that they can provide the same level of data and service to their employees booking on vacation. Another element here is you've now got in companies that have gone remote first, or, you have a new remote workforce. Those people are not accustomed to travel. Some of them have probably never booked on the OBT before, your sort of HR teams or your accountants or typical inside office workers. Now, when you're having quarterly retreats and plannings and such, they're suddenly business travelers. So there's a whole new population that you also need to care about and pay attention to there. So there's a sort of framework. Typically, I draw these out, but I was having issues with my iPad. So we've got a static one, which isn't quite as fun as watching my terrible handwriting appear on a screen. But basically, the paradigm is you have on your far left a sort of loose requirements and relaxed travel program, all the way to a strict on the far right. And then, the other paradigms are, is most of your travel domestic or is it international? And then the more international is it going into high risk areas and such? And so you can sort of say, we are a small company that's pretty loose in our requirements and restrictions, mostly traveling state to state. So maybe we just need, data service, data focused service. Whereas if we have, teams internationally traveling to, remote parts of Africa, the Middle East, whatever else that might be considered a danger area, we actually might need a full service team with extraction personnel and all that stuff. So that's one way to sort of think about how to evaluate your service. I'm going to quickly jump into a couple-minute demo of how Shep can help with this. We sort of talked about those data services, and you are actually going to be getting a sneak peek of one of our new providers. So if I go to, this works on Concur, this works on 2,000 travel sites. I'm just going to go to Hotwire for fun. And you can see this is white labeled, currently just white labeled as Netflix as a logo you'd recognize, but you can white label this with your own company branding. And you can see that if I type in and say, I am going to go to Toronto, we then reach out to these duty of care providers, and you'll see we have one up here. This is coming from one called Satata that I mentioned. And Satata is bringing you in information about your trip. And then the new one that is new as of today, we actually came out with the testing version of this, is powered by Riskline. And you'll see that has information about Canada, about the country, but it also now goes down to a state level. So you can see in Ontario, here's an overview of what you need to know. Here is the policy, the entry and borders, so effective on 19th, non-essential travel between these states, has checkpoints, what testing is needed, do you need health documentation between entering, and is there a tracing app? So this is new and shiny. I literally installed this extension just before this demo. So it's also one of my first times using it, but you can see it's sort of bringing in more granular data down to a state and sometimes even at a city level as well. So this is how Shep can work for your duty of care. It can bring this sort of dynamic data in from these external data sources, or just redirect employees to say, hey, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be booking here. All of our travel needs to go through our OBT. So make sure that you're doing that instead of booking on a consumer site. As I said, I had to get through that quickly, but you can see how we're able to bring that information right to the forefront in the OBT or on consumer sites. So as an employee searches for the trip, you're bringing this policy right to them at the exact moment where it's appropriate, relevant, and contextually relevant to them at that moment. So we are doing a deal right now on the Shep extension where you're getting 35% off if you sign up by the end of the quarter. And that doesn't have to be a full subscription. We can get a pilot going and then lock in that discount. But we recognize a lot of companies aren't doing a huge amount of travel now. So we're trying to be very flexible on pricing so that you do have this information in place before you need it, so that as travel does start to ramp up back up in Q3 and 4, that you have the data in place and visible to employees. You can also just come and schedule a full demo. If you go to sheptravel.com, there's a schedule a demo, and I can walk you through more than a minute and 30-second demo of the product. And we also have a couple of ebooks. We've got a 5-step to return to travel. That's a fairly broad overview of the steps you need to take, including, duty of care. This topic is a topic covered in this. And then we have a more specific one, specific to Shep, about how you can then implement this guided buying, where you're bringing in policy prompts, nudges, data sources into the traveler as they're searching. And those are also available on our website. Happy to answer any questions. You can just type them in the chat or unmute yourself. That's up to you. I'll stick around for a few minutes with any questions. One of the questions here is about the data sources. So we do work with 2 sources right now. Satata is live in the system, and then Riskline will be live once we complete a little bit of testing. And that's what I kind of gave you a preview of. And then, we are talking with some of the other bigger ones as well. But, there's a bit of testing and integration that needs to be done there. But we have found most of our clients who, come and said, look, they want their data source to be integrated, have found upon testing that they're getting the same level of data from these other services. And while in the long run, they do want a consistent data source, which we totally understand, this, what we have right now, has worked well as a stopgap, at least for now. Last question is around deployment. Yeah, so we typically push the extension out through your IT department. So your employees aren't having to go and install the extension. It's getting pushed out through IT and then signed on through single sign-on. So it's pretty frictionless for your employees. I think we're about at time. I don't see any more questions. So thanks everyone for being here, and we'll be back on in a week or 2. Thank you.